It's finally Friday. It's Friday, Friday.
Thank God it's
Welcome back to the Friday Show. I'm Scott Jagow along with Ray Paulick. We're glad to be back. We're glad to have you with us. Coming up, we'll talk about our sponsor for this show, MyRacehorse.com. It's an ownership opportunity at the highest levels of racing at the lowest possible price point. Find out more coming up. But first, Ray, in Kentucky this week, the Kentucky Horse Racing Commission moved forward with a proposal that will phase out Lasix. Not entirely, but for 2-year-olds next year, stakes races the year after that. There's still some official process to go through to get it actually approved, but let's assume that it does go through. How do you think this is going to affect the business of racing going forward?
Well, I think it's pretty much understood that racing is at a tipping point right now, and we've seen rapid change in California, which is ground zero for the breakdown crisis that we've had this year. But it's all over the country. You talk to racing executives or trainers or anybody, they feel the pressure everywhere. And getting rid of Lasix has nothing to do with breakdowns. I want to be clear about that. But it does have something to do, I think, with the culture of racing and the way the rest of society looks at the sport. So phasing it out is a good start. The problem that I see really is you're going to do one thing in Kentucky. How are you going to do the same thing in New York? How are you going to do the same thing in Maryland or Florida or California? How are we all going to, move this dysfunctional body from one place to another and wind up in the same place? I just don't see how that happens.
Even within Kentucky, a horse jumps up in class to stakes races. He's been running on Lasix. Now he can't. Then he goes back down. He's been not running on Lasix. Now he can. To me, that's going to be a lot of confusion and unnecessary confusion. It's going to be confusing for handicappers. The first time Lasix angle is a popular one. And so when you're handicapping races from different states, from different levels, it's going to be confusing. I appreciate the push forward on this. I wish they could completely get rid of it, because it's very hard to explain to the public outside of racing that, yes, these horses, some of them might need a drug to prevent bleeding, but they have to have it on race day. That's one part. And, why are they all seeming to use it? That doesn't make any sense. That's all very difficult to explain to people. And as you said, there may be no direct connection with the breakdowns, but there is a level of questioning by the public when they see this drug being used by everyone, even though only a few need it. And those that need it to race shouldn't be racing at all.
Yeah. The solution here is quite obvious, and that would be a national bill that would go through Congress and create one unified body to set the rules for every state. And, there's one major group, Churchill Downs, that does not favor that, along with horsemen's organizations. We're going to talk a little bit about this Thoroughbred Safety Coalition, too, which was recently formed. They're behind this as well. But the Thoroughbred Safety Coalition consists of most of the groups, of the 6 groups, favor federal legislation. Churchill Downs does not. And this is sort of the answer to that legislation, I guess. And they haven't really put any kind of a roadmap out there as to how they're going to get things done nationally when they have no clout, they have no teeth.
And like you said, a lot of the people who are in the coalition also support the Horse Racing Integrity Act. So right. You can't really say that the Thoroughbred Safety Coalition is a replacement for that necessarily, although it may be somewhat of a stumbling block as it's like the inside industry trying to solve its own problems instead of having outsiders from the USADA come in and clean up the sport. But you can't look at the track record of horse racing in the United States and say that what we've been doing has worked. And to me, this Thoroughbred Safety Coalition, it sounds like a good idea. I just don't know that in reality whether it's going to work better than anything else that's worked inside the industry to date.
Yeah, this is, we've had kumbaya type of organizations before, and they haven't worked because they can't mandate anything. They can encourage and recommend, but if I don't want to pick on any other states, but if California and New York agree to something, but Florida doesn't, then we don't have unity. We don't have uniformity. And I just don't know how this Thoroughbred Safety Coalition is going to get there, because they don't have authority unless they can come up with some way to basically force every racing state to get on board. And I haven't heard their plan for that yet. I'd like to see them succeed. I really want them to succeed, but I am very skeptical at this point.
Well, there was another event this week, the Global Symposium on Racing in Tucson, and there were a lot of different discussions about safety, and then there was one about racetrack surfaces, which I thought was really interesting, where you had Mick Peterson, the expert, giving his opinion, and then Michael Dickinson of Tapeta. Of course, he's supporting synthetic tracks, but I thought what he actually said was good to key on. He said, the revolution away from dirt and towards synthetics has already started, even if you don't want to admit it. And he said, I don't know that racetracks will actually take action to replace their dirt surfaces with synthetics, but politicians might make them.
Well, politicians have done it before. You'll remember that the California Horse Racing Board mandated synthetic surfaces for tracks that ran a certain number of dates every year. So Santa Anita, Hollywood Park, and Del Mar all put in different synthetic surfaces, which was unfortunate that they were all different. But Frank Stronach didn't like synthetic tracks, so he went to the Horse Racing Board and said, I want to put dirt back in. And they said, okay, fine. And then Del Mar took theirs out and Hollywood closed. So that part of it ended. Keeneland did a synthetic run, and under pressure from the breeders, I think, went back to dirt. So the politicians did it once, they can do it again in California and elsewhere.
Again, back to the idea that explaining this to the public, when you look at the data, 1.8 per 1,000 starts on dirt fatalities, and then if you look at synthetics, it's more like 1.2. So you wind up with several horses that die on dirt versus synthetics, and it's hard to explain to the public that, well, it's close enough. You can't really say that. You can't also say, we are doing every single thing possible to prevent fatalities, and you're racing on a surface that has more fatalities. That makes no sense to people. And so it's difficult to explain that from a public perception standpoint. And Mick Peterson also made a good point. He said, we need all the data possible to make the surfaces safer, whether it's turf, dirt, or synthetic. And, you have this equine injury database, and not everyone has bought into providing the data. So we're not doing all we can there.
Yeah, it's a little bit hard to explain that for the industry to say, yes, we know that synthetic surfaces are safer, but we don't breed horses for synthetic surfaces. We breed horses for dirt. I don't think that's going to fly really well when you get into state capitals or congressional hearings and that sort of thing. So, the equine injury database that you mentioned, first 5 years, the percentage of fatalities declined. And then all of a sudden it leveled off and actually ticked up a little bit. And it shouldn't be doing that, because the knowledge that the researchers have gotten in looking at this, in understanding what horses are at risk, and putting forth policies or recommendations, of course, which is all you can do in this industry, is make recommendations that should lower the fatality rate, they haven't been working. So, we're seeing more changes coming, not just with Lasix, which has nothing to do with breakdowns, but the pushing back on phenylbutazone or bute use from 24 to 48 hours, pushing back the timeline when you can use corticosteroids, which I think some people believe leads to injuries. So those things are going to take time to have an effect. One thing that should happen quickly if they change would be the track surfaces, as far as the impact it would have on safety.
Well, it took years to accrue the damage that is probably responsible for these fatalities. And a lot of it, I think, falls on the things you just mentioned, bisphosphonates, things like that that are dangerous for the horses and probably are leading to causes for breakdowns. And it took years to get here, so it's going to take years probably to reverse it. Does the industry have enough time? The bottom line right now is Santa Anita has a meet coming up in a couple of weeks. And they did not make the switch to synthetics. They're still on the same dirt surface. No matter whether you have a safety coalition or whatever, if the fatalities continue, the industry in California is in big trouble. I don't think it just cannot continue.
Yeah, and it's not like you can just flip the switch and say, okay, next week we're going to have a synthetic surface.
Right.
It takes months to order the materials, to mix the materials, to find a place to do all that work, and then to install the track. So they did have an opportunity over the summer and decided not to proceed yet. They're obviously discussing it among a lot of other things. And some other tracks are talking about it too, but I think everybody's afraid to go back to where we were a few years ago with trainers complaining about soft tissue injuries, which Mark Cassey said at the symposium is something he hasn't experienced at all.
He used the word baloney.
Yeah, okay. And then the pressure from breeders who feel as though the results on synthetic tracks do not support the stallion business that they've built. So it's a complex problem, but while we debate it and argue it, there's a group that's working very hard against this industry, and we've got to make some decisions, and they'll be tough decisions.
Well, we have a poll question. What do you think? Do you think this industry in the U.S. will go back to synthetics for most of the racetracks in the near future? Let us know your thoughts at PaulickReport.com. Well, Ray, as much frustration as we've been feeling this year in racing, on race day, it's still a huge thrill to be a part of this sport. And I remember a few years ago, I had a partnership opportunity, and I had a small percentage of a horse. In fact, you were with me that one day he won a race. We stopped the car in the middle of nowhere to watch the race. It was so exciting. But my point is, just having a little piece of a horse, it's a lot of fun. And there's a new way to get involved at the highest levels of racing without a lot of money. I'm talking like $65 for a share of a racehorse, MyRacehorse.com.
Yeah, and it's a one-time payment. It's not like you are going to have recurring payments to take care of training expenses. The way MyRacehorse.com is structured, it's a one-time payment, and they've got, as you said earlier, entry level at the highest part of racing. There's a horse with Bob Baffert, and there's another one with Todd Fletcher, and MyRacehorse.com is worked out a deal where if either one of those horses wins a Grade 1 race, there's a $6 million bonus that would be distributed to all of the shareholders.
Yeah, $6 million, that's a lot of money. It seems like a cool opportunity since you don't have to keep pouring in more money after more money, which is, sometimes with horses you have to do that. And the other thing that I really think is cool about this is the highest levels. You got Bob Baffert with a 2-year-old by Quality Road. You know how good he is with 2-year-olds. And then you have another colt by Tappet, the top sire in the country. So you're getting a lot of bang for your buck. And you can find out all the details at MyRacehorse.com. We appreciate them supporting the Friday show. That'll do it for this edition. We'll talk to you next time.